Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Daily Bolt with your host, Dr. Jeff Tilley. Today's topic, the quest for happy cows. Sit back and relax and enjoy today's edition of the Daily Bolt. So, first of all, it is Thanksgiving Day 2019 in the United States. So, happy Thanksgiving to everyone. Where I am at, it is becoming a more snowy Thanksgiving than it was at the start of the day. And we are in the midst of a run of several winter storms that are taking our very dry fall and bringing it to a very rapid halt with a much wetter start to the winter season. At least meteorological winter, which is often defined as December, January, and February. Moving right along. Since Thanksgiving Day is a day where a lot of people gather together and eat a lot of food, I thought that perhaps a food-related topic might be good for a short edition of the Daily Bolt today. And in particular, there have been several stories about cows that have caught my attention, as well as others, in the quest, apparently, to make our cows more happy. Now, those of you who have lived on the West Coast for a while or have been around at least a decade or so will remember a series of commercials that the California Agriculture Department sanctioned, talking about how the fact that California cows were happy meant that the milk and the other dairy products that you would get from the cows would be better products. So we still apparently have a quest for happy cows. We've got a number of stories about cows to try and make them in a better emotional state to produce milk. The most recent of these stories came out a couple of days ago, thanks to the BBC, reporting on the fact that a Russian dairy farmer has apparently invested in large virtual reality headsets custom-made for dairy cows in a bid to reduce their anxiety. And not only are these virtual reality headsets larger, but they have a specific program, which is basically a program where the cows are always out in the field, I guess, happily munching grass, being happy, doing what happy cows do in the summer in fields in Russia. And apparently this is supposed to allow for production of more milk and hopefully better quality milk. And there has been a recent study, and this is where we finally get into the science realm of all this, by the Moscow Ministry of Agriculture and Food, where apparently there is some link that has been shown between the cow's emotional experience and its milk yield. And the initial tests with the virtual reality system apparently boosted the overall emotional mood of the herd. I don't know how you measure that. I need to find someone who is a large animal veterinarian, and maybe they can tell me something about how the emotional mood of a cow can be measured. I'd like to see how that's quantified. Anyway, the experiments took place in an outlying district of Moscow, the so-called Rus-Moloko farm, and the farmer basically decided to try this because statements from other dairy farmers from other countries, particularly in Europe, but also in the Western Hemisphere too, show that in a calm atmosphere, the quantity and sometimes the quality of milk increases. So the jury is still out as to whether the virtual reality for cows really leads to better milk over the long term. The Moscow Agricultural Ministry has commissioned a long-term study, and if the positive results continue over the long term, you may be driving by your nearest dairy farm and see all of the cows wearing virtual reality headsets. So that's story number one. Now, we come to the second story. This one comes to us from England. And again, it's another attempt to make for happy cows. We have a large animal veterinarian in England his name is Alfonso Camasa, who sings opera to cows. And apparently this is whenever they need a routine examination or some other procedure that might be uncomfortable or painful for the cow. And supposedly the opera singing sounds good enough to the cow that it puts them in a nice, calm frame of mind. Maybe this is the guy I need to talk to find out how you quantitatively measure the emotional mood of cows. The farmers basically think that it's kind of impressive that the vet can sing, apparently well enough so he doesn't drive the cows away. They also think this is kind of funny, but there is still no super verdict on what the cows themselves think. I suppose the vet has not been kicked repeatedly while he's singing to them. It can be assumed that he's helping their emotional mood, or at least making them forget about the pain that they're feeling with whatever procedure that he's doing. So that is cow story number 2. And finally, as if we don't have enough interesting stories about cows to talk about today, we have from the Netherlands the fact that there has been an experiment designed to produce a floating farm for cows. Now, anyone who knows anything about the Netherlands knows that much of the country's landmass has been reclaimed from the sea over the course of the past several centuries. And there is still even land reclamation. Reclamation, there we go, from the sea that occurs today, although on a rather smaller scale. The idea of having a floating farm, so apparently this is on a man-made island, which may or may not be part of a reclamation project by the Dutch, but it is an island that's floating, and you have a herd of cows. And this floating island is relatively close to the very busy port of Rotterdam. And supposedly the idea for the experiment came about is to have the cows close, so that this is another way of think globally, buy locally, or buying local produce, like I was recommending in my sustainable responsible stewardship podcast a couple weeks ago. If you have your cows close by, then I guess you can go out and milk them. Well, and that would be lovely. I don't see how you're going to necessarily put this into a large-scale setup without basically deconstructing the cities that you've constructed, but I suppose for a port city, you can actually make this work by having this floating island relatively close. And the founder of the farm, a man by the name of Peter van Wingerden, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, they basically say no matter how much rain falls, no matter how high the sea level goes, we can always produce healthy dairy products and potentially, I guess, beef as well. It's hard to know. The article I'm referencing here, which is a very, very short article, does not specify whether it's solely limited to dairy cattle or if it is just a mixture of both dairy cattle and beef cattle. But if it applies to one, you could probably have it apply to both. Anyway, for a Thanksgiving evening edition of the Daily Bolt, that's it. So again, have a happy Thanksgiving, and we'll see you on a future podcast. I'm Dr. Jeff Tilley. God bless, good night, good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to the Christmas season.